Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chateau de l'Amour towered like a relic of old royalty, its stone turrets piercing the Vermont sky, draped in ivy and bathed in the golden light of an October afternoon. The castle's vast grounds, adorned with meticulously trimmed gardens and ancient oaks, blazing in crimson and amber, created the perfect backdrop for the season's most anticipated wedding. Inside, the grand hall sparkled with opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast glittering reflections on the marble floor. White roses overflowed from gilded vases, and the hushed murmurs of 300 guests, power players from Burlington, tycoons, and a few reporters, filled the air with eager anticipation. Today, Savannah Green, a rising star in interior design, was set to marry Carter Weston, the charming heir of a political dynasty. The town called it a fairy tale, but the truth was far more complicated. Savannah stood alone in the bridal suite, her reflection shimmering in a tall mirror with a Baroque gold frame. Her wedding dress, a masterpiece of ivory silk and hand-embroidered lace, clung to her body like a second skin. The fitted bodice flowed into a cascading train like a river of moonlight. Delicate embroidery, her own design, depicted vines and starflowers, a tribute to the gardens she had loved as a child. Her chestnut hair was swept into an elegant updo, soft curls framing her face, and her hazel eyes, usually sharp with creative focus, had softened under the weight of the moment. At 29, Savannah had made a name for herself by crafting spaces that told stories, homes, galleries, boutique hotels, each design a testament to her gift of turning chaos into beauty. Today, she believed, would be her chance to design her own future, one meticulously planned. She adjusted the pearl clip on her veil, her fingers steady though her chest fluttered. The weight of the day pressed down, not just the dress or expectations, but the promise of a life with Carter. He had entered her world 2 years ago like a storm of charm and ambition, his easy smile breaking through her defenses. As the mayor's son, Carter moved through life with the confidence of someone who knew every door would open for him. Their engagement, announced 6 months ago, had felt like a natural next step, a partnership between equals, or so she thought. Her father, a real estate developer with connections across the state, had beamed at the match, seeing in Carter a man who could elevate their family legacy. Savannah had seen something gentler, a companion who claimed to share her dreams. Downstairs, Carter worked the crowd like a professional. His tailored tuxedo highlighted his broad shoulders and golden hair. He shook hands, exchanged jokes, and accepted congratulations with a smile that never reached his eyes. To the guests, he was the perfect groom, a golden boy in a political empire. To himself, he was a man closing a deal. Marrying Savannah wasn't just about love. It was about securing a contract with her father's firm, a deal that would pour millions into his family's real estate ventures. The wedding was a means to an end, a performance he had perfected. Among the groomsmen, Noah Brooks stood out, not in Carter's bold way, but with quiet presence. A close friend since college and Carter's best man, Noah exuded calm, his deep brown eyes observing everything, his polite smile held in check. A structural engineer who had spent the past 3 years building bridges in remote corners of the world, he had returned to Burlington for this day, though not entirely willingly. He had known Savannah before Carter, their friendship forged in Dartmouth classrooms and late-night study sessions. They had once shared dreams over cheap coffee, debated art and function, and laughed until sunrise. Noah had loved her since then, a quiet, unwavering love he never dared to voice. When Carter, bold and relentless, asked her out, Noah had stepped back, burying his heart in work and distance. Now, standing in the shadow of her wedding, he felt the bruise of all those years. The ceremony was only minutes away. A string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon, its soft notes drifting like a tide through the hall. Guests turned toward the aisle, faces alight with expectation. In the bridal suite, Savannah took one last look in the mirror. Her bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus trembled slightly in her hands. She was ready, or so she thought. As she descended the spiral staircase, her phone, forgotten on a velvet chair, began to buzz. She nearly turned it off, but the chaos of the morning had made her forget. Curious, she paused, her gown pooling around her feet, and picked it up. A missed call from Carter. Strange, she thought. He should already be at the altar. A voicemail notification blinked on the screen. Her finger hesitated, then pressed play. Carter's voice was low, urgent, not meant for her. "Elise, listen. I've got it under control. The contract with her dad will be signed next week, and then I'm done. I'll call off the wedding. Some clean reason, like irreconcilable differences. You and I can pick up where we left off. Just stay quiet until then." The words cut like a knife, sharp and deliberate. Savannah's breath caught, her fingers gripping the phone until her knuckles turned white. Elise, Carter's ex, the one he swore was long in the past, a chapter closed before they ever met. Every promise, every late-night conversation, every moment of trust unraveled in seconds. He wasn't marrying her for love. He was using her, her family, her future, for his own ambition. And he planned to discard her the moment he got what he wanted. Her vision blurred, not from tears but from a cold, cutting clarity. The betrayal burned, but beneath it was the realization that she had nearly bound herself to a lie. She could storm into the hall, confront him in front of everyone, let her pain explode in shouts and accusations. But Savannah didn't fall apart like that. She had spent her life creating beauty from what was broken, and she would not let this moment turn her into a spectacle. She set the phone down deliberately. Her bouquet slipped from her hand, petals scattering across the floor like fallen stars. She stepped out of the room, heels clicking against the marble, and headed for the grand doors of the ceremony. The music swelled. Guests rose to their feet. The officiant lifted his hand in welcome. Carter stood at the altar, his perfect smile like a mask, though a flicker of unease crossed his face when he saw her. Savannah paused at the threshold. The weight of 300 eyes pressed down on her, whispers rustling like leaves in the wind. She looked at Carter, her gaze unwavering. His smile faltered. His hand twitched at his side. She saw him clearly now, the calculation beneath the charm, the fragility of his facade. Without a word, she turned, her gown trailing behind her like a farewell, and walked out of the castle. Gasps echoed, sharp and fragmented. Carter called her name, panic cracking his voice, but she didn't stop. The heavy doors shut behind her, muting the chaos. She stepped into the October air, the first raindrops kissing her skin, cool and cleansing. The gravel path crunched beneath her feet, leading her away from the life she had nearly accepted. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Her dress grew heavy, the hem soaked with mud, but she didn't care. The betrayal throbbed in her chest, raw and unrelenting, but beneath it flickered a strange relief. She had escaped a lie, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. Noah, standing near the altar, saw her go. While Carter shouted and guests whispered in confusion, Noah moved without hesitation. He knew Savannah, her strength, her need for space when the world became too much. Slipping through a side door, rain soaking his tux, he followed the path he knew she would take. The greenhouse, hidden behind the rose garden, was where she'd go, a forgotten place, wild and quiet, just like her. Rain began to fall, glistening drops like tiny pearls softly kissing the gravel path that led away from Chateau de l'Amour. Savannah kept walking, her once glorious wedding dress now heavy, the hem soaked and streaked with mud. Each step echoed with anger and pain, blending into an emotion she couldn't quite name. Carter's voice from the voicemail still rang in her ears, sharp as a blade. "The contract with her dad gets signed next week, and then I'm done." She had nearly tied herself to a man who didn't love her, a man who saw her as a pawn in his power game. But now, beneath the gray sky, she felt a flicker of freedom, however faint and cold. The gravel path led her through the rose garden, where the last blooms of the season bowed their heads beneath the rain. She didn't have a destination in mind, just needed to get away from the prying eyes of the crowd, the murmurs of the guests, and Carter's counterfeit smile. Her satin heels slipped on the slick stones, but she pressed on, her breath forming wispy clouds in the crisp October air. Eventually, she stopped in front of an old greenhouse, half hidden by overgrown shrubs. The glass was clouded by time, Vines tangled around the rusted frames, and the wooden door sagged as if it might collapse at a touch. Savannah pushed it open, the creaking hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the space was still. Only the rhythmic tapping of rain on the glass roof and the faint smell of damp earth stirred the air. She stood among withered potted plants, a few dried orchids reaching skyward like forgotten memories. Here at last she could breathe. Noah ran through the rain, his tuxedo soaked and clinging to his shoulders. He had left the grand hall the moment he saw Savannah walk out, not waiting for Carter's orders or for the murmurs to die down. He knew she wouldn't return to the bridal suite, wouldn't stand in the parking lot or cry to anyone. Savannah always sought places where she could face herself, and he had a hunch where that place might be: the old greenhouse, one he'd seen her linger at during a wedding venue tour weeks ago. He didn't know what had made her walk out, but the look in her eyes as she turned from the altar, resolute yet shattered, was enough to make him act. The rain blurred everything, but he spotted her silhouette through the foggy glass. Savannah stood still, her white gown a streak of light in the dim space. Noah paused at the door, inhaled deeply to steady himself. He wanted to ask her everything: what happened, why she left, but he knew she didn't need questions right now. He pushed open the door. The hinges groaned. Savannah didn't turn, but she knew it was him. Noah's footsteps, slow and steady, were nothing like Carter's urgency. She kept her eyes on the wilted orchids, holding back the flood of emotions inside. Noah stopped a few steps away, silent for a moment. Then softly, his deep voice broke the stillness. "I'm here if you need me." The words were simple, but they tugged her back from the edge. She didn't need rescuing. She didn't need anyone to dissect her pain. She just needed someone willing to stand beside her, without judgment. She turned and looked at him for the first time. Noah had changed in the past 3 years. Broader shoulders, more chiseled features, and tired eyes from years abroad. But his gaze was the same, warm, steady, and true, as if he could see even the things she never said. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice low but steady. I just needed a place to breathe." Noah nodded, asking nothing more. He slipped off his drenched tuxedo jacket and placed it over a broken chair. "Not a bad spot," he said, glancing around the greenhouse with a faint smile. "Bit wild. Kinda like you." Savannah let out a soft laugh, brief but real. It startled them both. "Wild, huh? You still tease me like in college." "Only when it makes you laugh," he replied with a hint of mischief, but his eyes stayed gentle, as if afraid to break the fragile peace. They were quiet for a moment, the sound of rain filling the silence. Savannah sat on a stone bench, her wedding dress billowing around her like a cloud. Noah stood near the door, hands in his pockets, giving her space. She looked at him, and memories returned like puzzle pieces long forgotten. Back in college, Savannah and Noah had been inseparable. They met in an art history class debating Bauhaus and minimalism until the professor had to cut them off. Late nights at the library, they shared lukewarm coffee and ambitious dreams. She wanted to design spaces that told stories. He wanted to build bridges that connected the world. Noah always had a way of making her laugh, whether with a silly joke or a sharp observation about a painting she was analyzing. Once, during a snowy night, they sat on a bench outside campus, and Noah looked at her a moment longer than usual. She had felt something then, a spark unnamed, but he looked away, and the moment passed. Noah had almost told her he loved her. It was during spring of junior year, while they were preparing for a student exhibition. He rehearsed the words dozens of times, but before he could say them, Carter appeared, confident, bold, and unapologetically flirtatious. He asked Savannah to dinner. She said yes, and Noah stepped back, telling himself she deserved someone who made a move. As Savannah and Carter started dating, Noah kept his distance, showing up only at group gatherings. After graduation, he took a job overseas, building bridges in remote places, leaving behind the memory of her like an unfinished song. Today, at her wedding, was the first time he'd seen her in 3 years. "You're not going to ask me why, are you?" Savannah said, pulling them back to the present. She looked at him, searching. Noah shrugged, a familiar gesture from the old days. "You'll tell me when you're ready, or you won't. Either way, I'm not here to push. She gave him a tired smile. You haven't changed. Always knew when to stay quiet. Not always, he said, voice dipping. There were times I should have spoken up. But I didn't. The words hung between them, heavy with all the things left unsaid. Savannah felt her heart speed up, but she didn't dare dig deeper. Not yet. Not with the wound from Carter still fresh. She stood, smoothing her dress, though it was wrinkled and muddy. I can't go back there, she said firmly. Not today. Then don't, Noah replied. But you can't stay here all night. It's cold and… He motioned to her dress. That outfit's not exactly rainproof. She laughed, louder this time. You got a plan, Brooks? Gonna help me escape? Maybe, he said, and his smile lit up the room. My family has a cabin not far from here. No one knows about it, not even Carter. You could rest, think, or not think at all. Savannah hesitated. The idea of leaving everything, the castle, the ceremony, the stairs, was wildly tempting, but she wasn't sure she was ready to lean on anyone, even Noah. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but quiet sincerity and realized she still trusted him, like she had all those years ago. All right, she said, but if your cabin has mice, I'm going back to the castle. Noah laughed and raised his hands in mock surrender. No mice, I promise. Come on, before we both catch pneumonia? They stepped out of the greenhouse, the rain still falling steadily. Noah draped his jacket over her shoulders, even though it was soaked and offered little warmth. Savannah walked beside him, the feeling both unfamiliar and comforting. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time that day, she didn't feel alone. As they left the castle grounds, their figures faded into the curtain of rain, leaving behind the greenhouse and the withered orchids as quiet witnesses to a new beginning, one not yet fully defined. Savannah didn't yet know that, in the days to come, Noah's cabin would become the place she found herself again, and perhaps something even deeper waiting to be discovered. The rain had stopped by the time Noah drove his old pickup truck down a pine-shaded trail, leading to his family's wooden cabin tucked beside a small lake on the outskirts of Vermont. The headlights swept over rain-soaked trunks, illuminating a modest house with a sloped roof and weathered porch. Savannah sat in the passenger seat, now dressed in an oversized sweater and a pair of jeans borrowed from Noah's suitcase. Her once luxurious wedding gown, now crumpled and dirty, lay bundled in the trunk like a relic of a life she had walked away from. She stared out the window, her heart heavy but oddly relieved, like each passing pine tree pulled her a little further from the castle, from Carter, from the pain. Noah parked and turned off the engine. He glanced at her and said with a soft grin, Welcome to the middle of nowhere, just like I promised. Mouse-free zone. Savannah gave a faint smile, her hand still gripping the seatbelt. Good, because if I see one, you're sleeping on the porch. She stepped out, inhaling the crisp air that carried the scent of pine and damp earth. The lake shimmered beneath the moonlight, and the cabin, though rustic, gave off a welcoming warmth. For the first time in a while, she felt safe, even if it was only temporary. Inside, the cabin was simple but cozy, polished wood floors, a stone fireplace, and worn armchairs surrounding an old coffee table. Noah lit a fire, the orange glow dancing across the walls. He handed her a mug of peppermint tea, the steam curling into the air. Rest, he said gently. Tomorrow you can decide your next step, or decide nothing at all. Savannah nodded, hugging the mug like an anchor. She sat by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker, and let the stillness of the cabin wrap around her. Noah didn't press her with questions, didn't try to fix anything. His silence was the most comforting thing she had. The days that followed passed like a slow, surreal dream. News of Savannah leaving her wedding spread quickly, tabloids screaming headlines about the runaway bride and the mayor's son's broken vows. Her phone, now powered off, was surely flooded with messages from friends, family, and Carter himself. But at the cabin, there was no cell signal. No reporters, just the sound of morning birds and the gentle lap of lake water. Savannah felt like she was shedding the layers of betrayed bride the world had cast upon her. Noah blended seamlessly into her new rhythm. In the mornings, they visited the farmer's market in a nearby town, where no one knew about Burlington's drama. Savannah would pick out ripe tomatoes and sprigs of cilantro, while Noah teased her for inspecting each apple like a scientist. "You're still the perfectionist," he'd say, raising an eyebrow as she rejected a slightly lopsided one. "And you're still lazy," she'd retort, tossing an apple into his basket, making them both laugh. Those moments, light, carefree, reminded her of college, when they were best friends, before love and betrayal complicated everything. In the evenings, they cooked together in the cabin's tiny kitchen. Noah turned out to be a surprisingly skilled cook, slicing onions with the precision of an engineer. Savannah, meanwhile, played with spices, turning simple ingredients into fragrant dishes. They ate by candlelight at a wooden table, talking about little things, a classic film, a song on the radio, or that time they got stuck in a campus elevator. Savannah noticed she was laughing more. The ache inside her hadn't vanished, but it was slowly fading. By the fire, they sat across from each other, red wine in hand. Noah shared stories about the bridges he'd built in Southeast Asia, about the villages where kids ran after him asking for candy. Savannah spoke of her most recent design project, a boutique hotel in Boston, where she transformed an old warehouse into a luxurious space. Their stories intertwined, with no mention of Carter or the wedding, but filled with the kind of quiet understanding that didn't need words. One night, as the fire dimmed to glowing embers, Savannah turned to Noah and said, "You don't have to do all this, you know. Taking care of me. I don't want to be a burden." Noah shook his head, his eyes gentle but unwavering. "You're not a burden, Savannah. You're someone I want to be with, even if it's just like this." The words made her heart skip, but she only nodded, too scared to respond. Part of her feared this closeness was a temporary escape, a way to fill the emptiness Carter had left. But when she looked into Noah's eyes, she didn't see pity, only sincerity, and that both comforted and confused her. Though the days in the cabin were healing, Savannah couldn't silence a quiet fear growing inside her. She wondered if she was leaning on Noah like a life raft, a shelter after the storm. Each time he made her laugh, each time he quietly cleared the dishes or fixed the squeaky window, her heart cracked open a little more. But was it real? Or just comfort disguised as connection? She worried that once the wounds healed, she might realize she didn't truly need Noah. Or worse, that she might hurt him in the end. Noah, for his part, carried a fear of his own. He had loved Savannah since college. Though he had buried the feeling for years, it had never faded. These days with her, laughing, sitting beside him by the fire, felt like a dream. But he knew Savannah was still hurting, and he feared that once she found herself again, she would leave, just as she had left his life 3 years ago. He wanted to tell her he wasn't just being kind, that he loved her, but he was afraid of breaking the delicate peace between them. So instead, he stayed silent and let their quiet moments speak for him. One afternoon, as they walked around the lake, Savannah stopped and gazed at the still water. "Noah," she asked softly, "do you think I'm just hiding if I stay here too long?" He looked at her, the wind stirring his hair. Running away isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes, it's just how we find our way home. She smiled faintly but didn't answer. His words touched something deep inside her, but she wasn't ready to face it yet. They kept walking, shoulder to shoulder, the silence between them filled with unspoken things. The days at the cabin stretched into a week, then 10 days. Savannah began to feel like herself again, not just a jilted bride, but the woman who loved colors, sketchbooks, and quiet mornings with an old friend. Noah became her anchor, not because he tried to fix her, but because he let her heal in her own way. One night, sitting by the fire, Savannah picked up one of Noah's old sketchbooks, filled with bridge designs he'd drawn over the years. She flipped through the pages, surprised by the detail and imagination. "You never told me about these," she said, tracing one of the drawings with her finger. Noah shrugged, though his eyes lit up. "They're just ideas, not good enough to build yet." "They're beautiful," she said with quiet conviction. "You should believe in them, the way you believed in me." Noah looked at her, and in that moment he wanted to say it all, that he didn't just believe in her, he loved her. He had for a long time, but he only smiled and said, "Maybe one day." They continued talking as the fire crackled, and Savannah felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her, though she wasn't ready to name it yet. What she didn't know was that in the days to come, this quiet closeness would lead them to a new crossroads and to challenges neither of them was prepared to face. 2 weeks after Savannah had walked away from the castle of Chateau de l'Amour, she sat on the porch of Noah's cabin, a mug of hot coffee in hand, watching the lake sparkle under the early winter sun. The Vermont air was biting cold, but she felt warm, not just from the thick sweater Noah had lent her, but from the peace she had found here. She no longer checked her phone every hour, no longer flinched at the sound of passing cars. The pain of Carter's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined her. She was learning to be Savannah Green again, not the abandoned bride the media labeled her, but herself. Noah stepped out of the kitchen carrying a plate of freshly made pancakes, the scent of butter and maple syrup drifting through the crisp air. "Breakfast of champions," he announced, setting the plate in front of her with a grin. "Eat them before they get cold." Savannah raised an eyebrow, pretending to be skeptical. "Champions, huh? Is this your sneaky way of bribing me into doing the dishes?" "Maybe," Noah replied, settling into the chair across from her, the mischief in his deep brown eyes unmistakable. "But you have to admit, these pancakes are worth a few plates." She laughed, cutting into one and nodding approvingly. Moments like this, light, familiar, had become part of her new life at the cabin. Noah wasn't just an old friend anymore. He was becoming something essential, though she wasn't ready to admit that to herself just yet. That morning, while they were cleaning up after breakfast, an email came through Savannah's inbox. She had turned her phone back on a few days earlier, just to check on work, and this message was from a real estate development firm in Maine. They were inviting her to design the interior for a luxury seaside resort, an ambitious project with a substantial budget and a vision for sustainable elegance. Savannah read the email, her heart racing. This was the kind of opportunity she used to dream of, a project that would not only challenge her creativity, but also mark a fresh start, far from the shadow of Carter and that wedding. She called to Noah, who was drying a skillet in the kitchen. "You need to read this," she said, handing him the phone. "They want me to design a resort in Maine. It sounds huge." Noah skimmed the email, then gave her a curious smile. "Huge is putting it lightly. This is Seaside Ventures, right?" She nodded, surprised. "How do you know that?" He set the skillet down, folding his arms. "Because I'm the lead engineer on the project. They hired me a few months ago to oversee construction. I didn't bring it up because, well, I figured you needed some space first." Savannah blinked, processing. "You mean we'd be working together?" "Only if you want to," Noah said quickly, his voice tinged with caution. "You don't have to decide now, but I think you'd be amazing. Better than amazing." She looked at him, feeling both excitement and nerves stir inside. Working with Noah meant extending their closeness, but also meant stepping out of the safety of the cabin. She took a deep breath, then nodded. "I'll take it, but you have to promise not to drive me crazy with your technical schematics." Noah laughed, raising a hand as if swearing an oath. "Promise, but you have to promise not to paint the whole construction site blush pink." They both laughed, and in that moment, Savannah felt a spark. Not just a professional opportunity, but a chance to build something new, beside Noah. A week later, Savannah and Noah arrived in Maine, where the resort project was in its early planning stages. The location was a stretch of rugged coastline, with cliffs that dropped into the vast blue Atlantic. The sea breeze carried the tang of salt, and the sound of waves echoed around them. Savannah stood on a hilltop, sketchbook in hand, mapping her first ideas. Glass walls to bring in natural light, reclaimed wood for warmth, and a color palette inspired by the ocean. Noah stood beside her, pointing at terrain maps and explaining drainage systems and foundation plans. They worked in sync, her creativity blending with his practicality as if they'd been collaborating for years. The following site visits drew them into a new rhythm. They drove through quaint towns, stopped at local furniture shops for inspiration, and picnicked by the shore with sandwiches, talking about design and life. Savannah found herself enjoying how Noah listened, how he asked about her ideas without ever imposing. He didn't try to control things like Carter had. Noah respected her, and that made her feel truly seen, not just as a designer, but as a person. But their growing closeness also sparked quiet tension, moments charged with emotion neither of them had the courage to name. One afternoon, while surveying land near the beach, Savannah slipped on a wet rock. Noah caught her quickly, pulling her close, and for a breathless moment, they stood inches apart, their breath mingling in the cold air. She looked into his eyes and saw something deeper than friendship. Her heart pounded, but she stepped back, managing a faint smile. The moment passed. On their third day in Maine, after a long day of site work, they stopped at a cliffside to watch the sunset. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Savannah sat on a rock, sketchbook open, but she wasn't drawing. She was thinking about Noah, about how integral he had become these past weeks, and about the fear that her feelings might just be a reaction to heartbreak. Noah sat beside her, not too close, not too far. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, then shook her head and laughed softly. "I don't know. Everything's good, but I keep wondering if I'm doing something wrong." "Wrong how?" he asked, his gaze calm but serious. She took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I'm scared I'm leaning on you because I'm broken, because Carter hurt me and you were there to catch the pieces. I don't want you to be just a way out." Noah was quiet for a moment, looking out at the ocean. Then he turned to her, his eyes steady. "Savannah, I'm not here because you're broken. I'm here because you're you. And I've wanted to be here, long before any of this happened." His words were like a stone dropped into a still lake, sending ripples through her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, Noah leaned in, gently placed a hand on her cheek and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, but full of intensity, as if he'd waited years for this moment. Savannah was startled, but she didn't pull away. She kissed him back, just for a second, feeling the warmth, the honesty in it. Then she stepped back, breathing hard. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need to be sure this isn't coming from a place of weakness. I need time." Noah nodded, no disappointment, no frustration. "I'll wait," he said simply, his gaze unwavering. "As long as it takes, I'll wait." She smiled, a mix of relief and fear. "You're too good to me," she said. "Sometimes I don't know how I'll ever deserve that." "You don't have to deserve it," he said. "Just be you. That's enough." In the days following the kiss, they continued working side by side. But something had shifted. They still joked, still debated over materials and layouts. But now there were lingering glances, silences filled with unspoken things. Savannah felt her heart opening, but she was still cautious. She needed to know that what she felt was real, not just a part of the healing process. True to his word, Noah didn't push. He remained the same, funny, attentive, and patient. He brought her coffee in the mornings, fixed design glitches without complaint, and shared stories of the bridges he dreamed of building. Savannah realized she didn't just like him. She admired him, his passion, his quiet strength, his kindness. She could feel something real taking root. One evening, while they were reviewing blueprints in their temporary project office, Savannah looked at Noah and thought, maybe this isn't just a new opportunity for work. Maybe it's a new beginning for both of us. But she didn't say it. Not yet. She still needed time. And Noah, just as he had promised, was still waiting. The coast of Maine in mid-November carried a harsh kind of beauty. Bitter winds whipped across the cliffs, and the crashing waves below played a relentless symphony. Savannah stood inside the temporary project office of the Seaside Ventures Resort, a repurposed shipping container with wide windows overlooking the ocean. Her interior design plans were spread across the desk. Sketches of the main lobby with floor-to-ceiling glass and reclaimed oak, a palette of blues and grays drawn from the sea. She wore a turtleneck sweater and jeans, her hair tied up, her gaze focused on every detail. Work had become her anchor, a way to reclaim control after the chaos of the past weeks. More than that, it had brought her closer to Noah, who now stood in the corner of the room, reviewing terrain maps with a colleague. They had found a rhythm since that unexpected kiss on the cliff. Though Savannah still kept emotional distance, she couldn't deny how deeply their connection had grown. True to his word, Noah didn't push. He remained a steady presence, bringing her morning coffee, teasing her when she obsessed over measurements, and sharing stories of the bridges he'd built. But there were moments, a lingering glance, a fleeting touch, that made her heart race and wonder if she was finally ready to move forward. That day, the site buzzed with activity. The crew was finishing the foundation work, and Savannah had just received glowing feedback from the developers on her latest designs. She was discussing a wall adjustment with Noah to optimize natural light when a staff member entered, looking hesitant. "Miss Green," he said, clearing his throat, "someone's here to see you." "At the main gate." Savannah frowned. "Who is it? Do they have an appointment?" "He said his name is Carter Weston," the man replied, voice dropping. "No appointment, but he's very persistent." The name hit her like a punch to the chest. A few steps away, Noah tensed, his expression darkening. Savannah inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "Thank you," she told the staffer. "I'll be right there." Then she turned to Noah, her expression calm but uncertain. "Can you stay here? I want to handle this myself." Noah nodded, though she could see the tension in his jaw. "If you need me, just call," he said quietly. She gave him a faint smile before stepping outside, the cold ocean wind stinging her cheeks as she walked toward the front gate. Carter was waiting there, wrapped in a designer wool coat, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his signature, confident smile plastered across his face, as if nothing had happened. But Savannah saw the tension behind his eyes, the way his hands were stuffed into his pockets to hide their unease. She stopped a few feet from him, arms crossed, her gaze cool. "Savannah," Carter said, his voice smooth but slightly urgent, "you look, well, I'm glad." "What do you want, Carter?" She cut in, not wasting time on pleasantries. "You have no reason to be here." He took a step closer but halted when she stiffened. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I came to apologize. I was wrong, Savannah. What I said in that voicemail, I didn't mean it. I panicked. The pressure, from my family, the job. But I love you. I want to make things right." Savannah let out a short, dry laugh, without amusement. "Make things right? You were going to use me to land a deal with your father, then dump me afterward. Do you think I'm sorry erases that?" Carter flinched but quickly recovered his charming facade. "I know I hurt you, but think about it. Savannah, we're good together. You and me, we were a perfect team. I'm running for mayor now, and I need you by my side. Not just for the image, but because I really want you back." She stared at him, finally seeing through every word. Carter wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he got caught. With his campaign approaching, he needed a picture-perfect comeback story. He needed the elegant, betrayed bride to stand beside him in press photos. She shook her head, her voice cold and sharp. "You don't love me, Carter. You love the idea of me. You love what I can do for you. But I'm not a prop for your campaign. Goodbye." She turned to leave, but Carter grabbed her wrist. "Savannah, wait!" She yanked her arm free, fire flashing in her eyes. "Don't touch me, and don't ever come near me again." Carter opened his mouth to speak, but the look in her eyes silenced him. He stepped back, the smile finally fading from his face. After a moment of hesitation, he turned and walked toward his sleek car, waiting by the curb. Savannah stood there, breath uneven, feeling both triumphant and exhausted. She had faced him, and she had won. But as she returned to the project office, she had no idea another storm was brewing. The next day, an article exploded online with the headline, "Savannah Green and Carter Weston reunited after canceled wedding?" The story cited sources close to the couple, claiming they had met in Maine and that Savannah was considering reconciling to support his political run. A blurry photo, taken from a distance, showed Carter holding her wrist, a moment stripped of all context, implying intimacy where there was none. The article spread like wildfire, amplified by social media and wild speculation. Savannah saw the article when a colleague texted her the link. She clicked it, her stomach sinking. She knew the truth. She had rejected Carter. There was no reunion, But the media had painted a completely false picture. She tried calling Noah to explain, but his phone rang with no answer. Inside the office, Noah had already seen the article. He read the headline, stared at the image, and felt something inside him collapse. He remembered Savannah walking out to meet Carter, remembered the tension in her eyes. He had promised to wait, but now the old fear returned, that she would choose Carter, that he had only ever been a temporary escape. The article, no matter how misleading, amplified that fear. He couldn't bring himself to face her. He didn't want to hear her confirm what he was starting to believe. Wordlessly, Noah packed up his laptop and sketches, left a brief note for the project manager saying he needed a few days off for personal reasons, and left the site. He drove back to Burlington, leaving Savannah and the project behind. This time, he was the one walking away, not because he wanted to, but because he thought it was what she needed. Savannah knew something was wrong the moment Noah didn't show up the next morning. She asked around, and one colleague told her he had left suddenly, citing time off. Her calls still went unanswered. She reread the article, realizing he must have seen it, and her heart sank. Noah thought she had gone back to Carter. He misunderstood, and instead of asking her, he chose to disappear. She sat alone in the office, staring at the ocean, feeling helpless. She wanted to explain, to tell him she hadn't taken Carter back, that she was starting to feel something real for him. But Noah was gone, and she didn't know where he had gone. The pain of this misunderstanding cut deeper than Carter's betrayal, because this time, it involved someone she truly cared about. Savannah stood up, determination taking root. She wouldn't let things end like this. She would find Noah, even if it meant driving across all of Vermont or Maine. She would tell him the truth, not just about the article, but about her feelings, that she was falling in love with him, even if it had taken her too long to realize it. But first she needed a plan, and she knew exactly where to start. The cabin in the woods where it had all begun. The sky over Maine was a flat, wintry gray as Savannah left the Seaside Ventures job site, her rental car gliding onto the highway that wound back toward Vermont. Cold wind blew through a cracked window, bringing with it the scent of salt and a deep sense of unease. The misleading headline, Savannah Green and Carter Weston reunited after canceled wedding, still felt like a blade twisting in her mind. But what hurt even more was Noah's silence. He had left the project without a word. No calls, no messages. She knew he had seen the article, knew he believed she had gone back to Carter, and the thought that Noah, the man she had fallen for, without even realizing it, believed she had betrayed him, made her chest ache. She couldn't let it end like this. She had to find him, and she knew exactly where to start. The cabin where they had healed together, where she had found herself again. The dirt road leading to the cabin looked familiar, the tall pine trees standing still in the fading light. Savannah's heart pounded as she parked and took in the little wooden house. No lights, no smoke from the chimney. She stepped out, her boots crunching against the gravel, and walked up to the porch. The door was locked, the curtains drawn. She knocked, called his name. "Noah? Are you in there?" But only the wind responded. Peeking through the window showed nothing but darkness. He wasn't there. She sat down on the porch steps, a wave of helplessness washing over her. She had driven for hours, clinging to hope that he would be here, that she could explain everything. But the cabin was empty, and she had no idea where he had gone. She took a deep breath, fighting back the tears. She hadn't cried when she walked away from the wedding. She hadn't cried when she faced Carter. But now the thought of losing Noah made her hands tremble. Then she remembered. Noah once mentioned keeping a spare key under a stone near the porch. She scrambled to look, fingers trembling as she turned over rocks until she found it, a small, worn silver key. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent of pine wood and old fireplace ash embraced her like a memory. The cabin looked just as she remembered. Polished wooden floors, the stone hearth, and a coffee table stacked with a few of Noah's engineering books. But it felt colder, missing the warmth of the days they'd spent together. She walked through the kitchen, where they had cooked and laughed, and into the living room, where they'd sat by the fire trading stories. On the wall, she spotted the old map Noah had once shown her, the one he'd pinned with small red tacks marking bridges he'd built and places he dreamed of visiting. But now there were more items. A movie ticket from the comedy they saw in town, a crumpled receipt from the farmer's market with her joking note about apples, and a Polaroid of the two of them by the lake. She was laughing, and Noah was looking at her with that soft, unguarded gaze. Their memories, preserved like treasures. Savannah touched the map, and finally her tears fell. Noah wasn't just a friend. He hadn't just been a safe harbor. He had loved her, not with grand gestures like Carter, but with quiet patience in the way he'd held on to the tiniest moments between them. And she loved him too, though it had taken her far too long to realize it. She couldn't leave without telling him. Even if he never came back to read it, she had to say it. She found a sheet of paper and a pen on the coffee table. Sitting down under the soft glow of a table lamp, she began to write. The words came freely, spilling from her heart without hesitation. Noah, I don't know where you are right now, or if you'll even read this, but I need to write it. You deserve the truth, not just about the article, but about how I feel. That article was a lie. I didn't go back to Carter. He came to Maine, begged me to take him back, and I said no. I told him to leave and never come back. That photo, him holding my hand, was just a moment where he tried to stop me from walking away, and I pulled free. I don't want him, Noah. I never did. Not after what he did. But what I need to tell you isn't about Carter. It's about you, about us. It took me too long to realize I love you, not because I'm broken, not because you were there when I fell apart. I love you because you're you, the man who makes me laugh, who listens, who saves grocery receipts like they're priceless. I love the way you look at me, the way you're patient, the way you believe in me, even when I don't believe in myself. I told you I needed time, and you promised you'd wait. But I don't need time anymore, Noah. I need you. If you still love me, come back. Find me, whether in Maine or anywhere else. And if you don't, if I've hurt you too much, at least let me say it, completely, honestly, I love you, Noah Brooks. I've always loved you, even if I didn't understand it until now. Savannah. She folded the letter, her hands trembling slightly, and placed it on the coffee table beneath the map. She took one last look around the cabin, her eyes lingering on the chair where Noah once sat, telling her about bridges and dreams. She wanted to stay, to wait for him, but she knew she had to return to Maine. She had a project to finish, a future to face. She needed to prove she was strong, even if her heart was breaking. She locked the cabin, slipped the key back beneath the rock, and drove away. The moonlit trail stretched ahead like a ribbon toward an unknown future. In the days that followed, Savannah returned to the resort site in Maine and buried herself in work. She revised drawings, met with contractors, responded to emails from the developers. But every night, when she returned to her rented apartment, she checked her phone, hoping, waiting, for a message, a call. Nothing came. She wondered if he had found the letter, if he had read it, or if he had already decided she wasn't worth coming back for. But Savannah didn't give up. She kept going. She kept living. And she held on to the truth she had poured into that letter. What she didn't know was that back in Burlington, Noah had returned to the cabin a few days after she left. He found the letter on the table, read every word, and it was like the light returning after a long winter. He read it again, by the firelight this time, and knew he couldn't let her wait any longer. He packed his things, folded the letter into his jacket pocket, and got in his truck. He didn't know exactly where she was, but he knew where he'd find her, at the resort they'd built together, the dream they'd shared. This time he wouldn't walk away. This time he would tell her everything he'd held in for years, and he wouldn't let her go again. 1 month after Savannah left her letter in the little cabin, the Seaside Ventures Resort in Maine was preparing for its grand opening. The once rugged cliffs along the coast now framed a magnificent architectural work. Glass walls welcoming ocean light, reclaimed oak adding warmth, and interior details that reflected Savannah's refined vision. The main hall, the resort's heart, glowed under chandeliers inspired by ocean waves, with marble floors and abstract paintings evoking the hues of a Maine sunset. This was the result of months of tireless work, of late-night design revisions, daring decisions, and the belief that something beautiful could be built from the wreckage of the past. Savannah stood in the dressing room, looking at her reflection. She wore a sleek ocean blue silk dress, elegant, minimal, and nothing like the wedding gown she had once walked away from. Her chestnut hair flowed in soft waves, and her hazel eyes shimmered with confidence and just a trace of nerves. She was set to give the keynote speech at the opening, representing the design team. This was her moment, not just to showcase her talent, but to declare that she had survived the darkest chapters of her life, the betrayal by Carter, the false headline, and the silence from Noah. Noah. His name still pulled at her heart. She hadn't heard from him since leaving the letter, though she checked her phone every night, hoping for a message, a sign he had read her words. She had confessed her love, told him she didn't need more time, but his silence spoke louder than any reply. She told herself to keep moving, to focus on work, but every time she looked out at the sea, she remembered that kiss on the cliff, his gentle eyes and the memory map in the cabin. She still hoped, however faintly, that he would come. The grand hall was packed, investors, VIP guests, reporters, and curious locals eager to see the project that had transformed the Maine coast. The sound of violins floated through the air, mingling with laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. Savannah stepped onto the stage, the spotlight catching her like a lighthouse in the night. She took a deep breath and began. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and composed, "today is special not just because we are opening Seaside Ventures, but because we are witnessing the power of renewal. This project began with a simple idea, to turn a stretch of wild land into a space where people could find peace and beauty. But to get here, we had to endure setbacks, challenges, and moments that nearly broke us." Heads nodded throughout the crowd, their attention locked on her. Savannah spoke of the design process, of how her team turned sketches into structures, of long nights and bold decisions. She never mentioned Carter or the canceled wedding, but the weight of her personal journey was there, in every word about rising after a fall, about rediscovering who she was. As she neared the end of her speech, her eyes swept the room, and then she saw him. Noah. He stood at the back of the hall near the entrance. Dressed in a dark suit, his hair tousled by the wind, his deep brown eyes fixed on her. Her breath caught, her pulse quickened. He was here. After everything, he had come. She steadied herself and continued, her voice more tender now. "Not everyone walks the right path from the start, but if we're brave enough to walk away from what's wrong, whether it's a flawed design or a wrong turn in life, we can find what's truly right. And today I stand here to say, what's right is always worth fighting for." The audience applauded, but Savannah barely heard it. She watched as Noah made his way forward, moving gently through the crowd. By the time she stepped down from the microphone, he was waiting at the base of the stage, his eyes shining like firelight. "Noah," she whispered, voice trembling. He smiled, a mixture of tenderness and fire. "I read your letter," he said, his voice low but carrying in the hush that followed. "And I'm sorry I made you wait." Savannah shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're here. That's all that matters." Noah stepped onto the stage, indifferent to the hundreds of eyes on them. He stood so close she could smell the familiar scent of cedar and something uniquely him. "I thought you needed time," he said, his voice a vow. "I thought I had to protect you, or protect myself from loving you too much. But now I know we both need courage. You had the courage to walk away from that wedding. You had the courage to write that letter. Now I want to be brave for you." He dropped to one knee and pulled a small box from his pocket. When he opened it, a silver ring sparkled under the stage lights, set with a small ocean blue stone, just like the sea outside. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread, but Savannah heard only Noah's voice. "Savannah Green," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I've loved you since college, since we argued over art history and drank cold coffee. I've loved you through years apart, and even when I thought I'd lost you. I want to spend my life loving you, building dreams with you, the way we built this resort. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Savannah's cheeks as she smiled, the most radiant smile of her life. "Yes, Noah, I will." He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into his arms. The crowd erupted in applause, some whistling, but all Savannah could feel was Noah's warmth, his heartbeat against her own. Then he kissed her. It was deep, honest, and fierce. Like all the years of waiting, the pain, the longing had melted into this one perfect moment. After the ceremony, Savannah and Noah slipped out onto the balcony overlooking the sea. The night was cold, but they stood close, fingers intertwined. Savannah looked down at the ring, brushing the blue stone with her thumb. "You chose it because of the ocean, didn't you?" she asked, smiling. Noah nodded. "For the ocean, and for you. I bought it after I read your letter, when I knew I had to come back." She looked at him, her eyes full of love. "I thought you weren't coming. I thought I'd lost you." "I thought so too," he said quietly. "When I saw that article, I believed you had chosen Carter. I left because I was scared to face the truth. But when I read your letter, Savannah, it changed everything. You gave me the courage to come back." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We both needed courage, didn't we? To love, to trust, to begin again." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "And we did it." They stood there together, the ocean glittering under the moonlight. This wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. The resort, the letter, the kiss on stage, each a piece of the journey that brought them here. Savannah was no longer the runaway bride, and Noah was no longer the silent friend. They were a team now, ready to build a future, not just of wood and glass, but of love and trust. 1 year after the grand opening of Seaside Ventures, Noah's family cabin in the Vermont countryside was glowing with quiet magic. The tall pine trees lining the lake shimmered under the crisp October sun, their golden leaves drifting like nature's own confetti. The front porch was transformed into an altar of white blooms, roses, hydrangeas, and baby's breath, woven with green vines into a delicate archway. Simple wooden chairs lined the grassy aisle, no more than 50 in total, reserved for close friends, family, and a few colleagues from the main project. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no extravagant castle like Chateau de l'Amour. This was a small, intimate wedding, wholly and truly Savannah Green and Noah Brooks. Inside the cozy bedroom of the cabin, Savannah stood in front of a weathered wall mirror. The dress she wore was unlike anything she'd ever worn before. A simple white silk gown, soft and flowing, with sheer lace sleeves and a hem that brushed just above her ankles. There was no train, no layers of tulle, only elegance, honesty, and grace. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves, crowned with a delicate baby's breath wreath. In her hands, she held a bouquet of wildflowers, white daisies, lavender, and dusty miller, picked earlier that morning with Noah by the lake. Her hazel eyes shimmered, not with nerves, but with pure, quiet joy. This time, she wasn't walking into a role. She was walking toward the man she loved. Outside, Noah stood beneath the floral arch, dressed in a light gray suit, no tie, top button undone for comfort. He looked calm, but his fingers twisted slightly, his only sign of anticipation. Beside him stood the officiant, an old college friend who had known them both since their library debates and cold coffee nights. Guests chatted in low tones, laughter mingling with the soft notes of Clair de Lune, played by a local violinist. The lake mirrored the sunlight, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and lavender. The past year had been a journey of connection and rediscovery. After Noah's public proposal at the resort, they returned to Vermont and continued working together, not just on design and engineering projects, but on their relationship. They spent evenings by the cabin's fireplace, dreaming up their future, scribbling plans in worn-out notebooks. Savannah opened a small design studio in Burlington, specializing in sustainable projects. Noah took on more bridge contracts throughout New England, but he always came home. They learned to love not only in romantic moments, but in the daily ones, fixing a squeaky door, arguing about kitchen paint colors, walking the lakeshore at dawn. There were moments of doubt. Savannah still wrestled with fears, ghosts from Carter's betrayal and her own past uncertainties, but Noah always reminded her of her strength. He too had to learn to open up, to confess that his fear of losing her had once made him walk away. But now they met each other with action. Not just words, like Noah bringing her coffee every morning, or Savannah quietly redrawing one of his bridge plans when she saw he was stuck. Carter, now a struggling political figure mired in scandal, had faded from their lives. The tabloids had moved on. Peace had found them, not because they sought attention, but because they sought each other. And in each other they found home. As the music shifted to a softer refrain, the cabin door opened. Savannah stepped out, and the world paused. Noah looked at her, heart pounding, not from nerves but disbelief that she was truly his. She walked slowly down the gravel path, sunlight catching in her hair, her dress glowing like moonlight. Guests rose, a few wiped away tears. But Savannah saw only Noah. Her eyes locked with his, her smile said it all. "This is where I belong." She reached him under the white arch. Noah took her hands, warm, steady. The officiant began, his voice rich and calm, speaking of love, of the journey they'd taken, of how they'd found each other through mistakes and courage. But Savannah and Noah barely heard the words. They were lost in each other. When it came time for their vows, Savannah spoke first. Her voice was strong, clear. "Noah Brooks, the first time I walked into a wedding, I walked away because I knew it wasn't where I belonged. But today, I'm not walking away. I'm walking toward you. You are my home, my dream, the one who makes me laugh on the worst days. I promise to love you, to trust you, and to build a life with you, full of moments like this one." Tears shimmered in Noah's eyes, but he smiled, holding her tighter. His voice when he spoke was low and full of truth. "Savannah Green, I've loved you since those late nights in college, arguing about art, drinking cold coffee. I've loved you through the years apart, through the times I thought I'd lost you. You are courage. You are light. You're everything I've ever dreamed of. I promise to be there. Not just on the easy days, but on the hard ones too. I'll spend my life making you happy." They exchanged rings, hers the same ocean blue one from the proposal, his a simple silver band with her name engraved inside. The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Noah pulled her into his arms. Their first kiss as husband and wife wasn't just a promise, it was proof of healing, of growth, of a love made real through all the pain and distance. Guests erupted into applause, but the world around them melted away. Savannah felt only the warmth of Noah's kiss, the steady beat of his heart. The reception was held right on the lakeshore, under strings of lanterns and long tables dressed in white linen. The food was simple but delicious: grilled herb chicken, fresh salad, rustic breads, and a 3-tier vanilla buttercream cake adorned with wildflowers. A folk band played upbeat tunes, and guests danced barefoot in the grass, children laughing, grandparents spinning in slow circles. Savannah and Noah shared their first dance to Harvest Moon by Neil Young. Slow, sweet. They swayed gently as he twirled her clumsily, laughing. "You're still the worst dancer," she teased. "But you still chose me," he grinned, pulling her close. Later, they cut the cake, tossed the bouquet, Savannah's friend caught it, and posed for sunset photos by the lake, golden light casting everything in warm glow. When night fell, they sat by a bonfire surrounded by loved ones. Laughter rose with the smoke. Savannah leaned on Noah's shoulder, watching the flames flicker. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "That it took us so long to get here?" Noah kissed her hair, his eyes glowing in the firelight. "Not for a second. Every road, every mistake, led me to you. I'd take that road 1,000 times if it meant ending up here." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me too." They looked up at the sky. Stars blinked like dreams come true. This wedding wasn't just an event. It was proof of love, of bravery, of the kind of future two people can build, together, day by day, moment by moment, forever.